Quick like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. My name is Vincent. I'm 41 years old, and I own a commercial real estate investment firm in Phoenix, Arizona. I spent the last 15 years building my business from nothing. Started with one small office building, leveraged it into another, then another, until I had a portfolio worth just over $12 million. I wasn't born rich. I worked construction through college, saved every dollar, took calculated risks, and built something real. Something valuable. My wife Adriana knew all of this when she married me. She knew exactly what kind of life she was getting. What I didn't know was that she'd been living a completely different life behind my back, and that her boyfriend thought he was about to inherit the lifestyle I'd built. He was wrong. Adriana and I met 11 years ago at a charity gala in Scottsdale. She was working as an event coordinator for the venue, and I was there networking with potential investors. She was beautiful, dark hair, sharp eyes, the kind of confidence that made people pay attention when she walked into a room. We talked for hours that night. She was smart, ambitious, funny. Said she wanted to start her own event planning business someday. I like that about her. The drive, the vision. We got married 2 years later. Small wedding, just family and close friends. She moved into my house in Paradise Valley, a custom-built place on 2 acres with mountain views. For bedrooms, pool, home office where I manage my investments. For the first few years, things were good. Adriana quit her job at the venue and started her event planning business like she'd always wanted. I helped her with startup capital, $50,000 to cover initial expenses, equipment, marketing. She booked a few small events, corporate parties, birthday celebrations, a couple of weddings. Nothing huge, but she was building something. I was proud of her. Then about 4 years ago, the events started getting less frequent. She complained that the market was saturated, that competition was too intense, that clients were cheap and demanding. Maybe take a break, I suggested. Focus on quality over quantity. Build a reputation for high-end events. Easy for you to say. She'd snap back. You've got millions in real estate. I'm trying to build something from nothing. I built my business from nothing too, Adriana. It takes time. But she didn't want to hear it. The business limped along for another year before she officially closed it. Said she was done with the stress, done with difficult clients, done with the whole industry. What are you going to do instead? I asked. She shrugged. I don't know. Maybe I'll just take some time to figure it out. That was 3 years ago. She never figured it out. Instead, she spent her days at the gym, at lunch with friends, shopping, getting her nails done, going to yoga classes. The lifestyle of someone who didn't have to work because her husband's real estate portfolio generated enough passive income to support both of them comfortably. I didn't mind supporting her. That's what marriage is supposed to be. Partnership. Support. What I did mind was finding out she'd been lying to me for 2 years. It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. I was working from home on a Tuesday afternoon, taking calls in my office with the door closed. Adriana thought I was on a conference call that would last at least an hour. I finished early, opened my office door to grab some water from the kitchen. That's when I heard her voice coming from our bedroom upstairs. Loud, excited, laughing. I know, baby. I miss you too. Just a few more months, and we won't have to hide anymore. I froze at the bottom of the stairs. He has no idea. Trust me. He's so focused on his properties, he barely notices what I'm doing. My heart started pounding. Once the divorce is final, we can be together. And with half of what he's worth, we'll be set for life. We can travel, buy that house in Cabo you love, never worry about money again. I stood there, completely still, listening to my wife plan her future with someone else. Using my money. I love you too. I'll see you Thursday. Same place. I heard her hang up, heard her moving around upstairs. I went back to my office quietly, closed the door, and sat down at my desk. My hands were shaking. 11 years of marriage. 11 years of building a life together. And she was planning to leave me, take half of everything I worked for, and run off with some guy I didn't even know existed. I took a breath, then another. Then I started planning. The first thing I did was call my attorney. His name was Richard Castellano, and he'd handled all my real estate contracts for the past decade. Sharp, ruthless when he needed to be, and absolutely discreet. Richard, I need advice. Personal matter. What's going on, Vincent? I think my wife is having an affair. I need to know what my exposure is in a divorce. There was a pause. Are you sure? I overheard a phone call. She was talking about waiting for the divorce to be final so she could be with someone else. Talking about taking half of what I'm worth. Shit. Okay. First question. How are your assets structured? Most of my real estate is held in an LLC that I formed before we got married. My personal residence is in both our names. We have joint bank accounts for household expenses, but my investment accounts are separate. That's good. Arizona is a community property state, so anything acquired during the marriage is generally split 50-50. But assets you brought into the marriage or kept in separate legal entities have some protection. Some protection? It's complicated. If she can argue that marital funds were used to improve or maintain those properties, she might have a claim to appreciation in value. And the house you share is definitely community property. I did quick math in my head. The house was worth about $2.3 million. We bought it 5 years ago for $1.8 million, so there was $500,000 in equity. What about her business? I gave her $50,000 to start it. Did you structure that as a loan or a gift? Gift. I wanted to support her. Then it's probably considered a community investment. But if the business failed and has no value, there's nothing to split there. What should I do? Document everything. If she's having an affair, we need proof. Hire a private investigator. Get photos, evidence of where she's going, who she's with. The affair itself won't change the property division in Arizona, but it gives us leverage in negotiations. Nobody wants their infidelity exposed in court documents. How long will this take? Depends on how much evidence you want. A few weeks minimum. Maybe a month or two if you want a really solid case. Do it. I want to know everything. Richard referred me to a PI named Sarah Chun. Former police detective, specialized in infidelity cases, came highly recommended. She met me in my office the next day. Mr. Vincent, she said, shaking my hand. Richard filled me in on the basics. Your wife is having an affair, and you want documentation. That's right. What do you know so far? I told her about the phone call, the mention of Thursday, the reference to same place. That's good. Gives me a starting point. She pulled out a notepad. I'll need some information from you. Her daily routine, the car she drives, her friends, any patterns you've noticed. I gave her everything. Adriana's schedule, her typical haunts, the fact that she went to yoga every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Yoga, Sarah repeated, writing it down. That's a classic cover. How long has she been going? About 2 years. And you've never been suspicious? I trusted her. Sarah nodded without judgment. I'll start surveillance this Thursday. Follow her from the house. See where she actually goes, who she meets. Should have preliminary findings within a week. How much is this going to cost? My rate is $150 an hour plus expenses. For a case like this, figure maybe 40 to 60 hours of surveillance over 2 to 3 weeks. Call it $10,000. Do it. She stood up. One more thing, Mr. Vincent. Once we start this process, there's no going back. Whatever I find, you're going to have to deal with it. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Adriana's voice on the phone, the way she'd laughed about me not noticing, the casual way she planned to take half of everything I'd built and give it to someone else. I'm prepared. Sarah started surveillance that Thursday. I made sure to have a late meeting downtown so Adriana wouldn't wonder why I was staying away from home. At 8 p.m., Sarah texted me. Target left residence at 5:45 p.m. Followed her to the Biltmore area. She met a male, approximately 35 to 40 years old, at a restaurant called The Arrogant Butcher, currently inside having dinner. We'll continue to monitor. I stare at my phone. There it was. Confirmation. Another text came through at 9:30 p.m. They left the restaurant together. Both got into his vehicle, a black Mercedes C-Class, heading north on Scottsdale Road. Then at 10:15 p.m., targets checked into the Phoenician Resort. Single room. Still inside. I sat in my office, alone, staring at those text messages. My wife was at a luxury hotel with another man. While I paid for her car, her credit cards, her lifestyle, I went home at midnight. Adriana's car was in the driveway. She was in bed, pretending to be asleep. I got undressed quietly and lay down beside her, staring at the ceiling in the dark. She had no idea I knew. No idea what was coming. Sarah's report came 2 weeks later. It was thorough. Adriana had been meeting the same man, identified as Kyle Preston, age 38, owner of a luxury car rental business, twice a week for the past 6 months, possibly longer. They met at various restaurants, always expensive. Then went to hotels. Always nice ones. The Phoenician, the Four Seasons, the Ritz-Carlton. Sarah had photos. Adriana and Kyle walking into hotels together, kissing in parking lots, holding hands at dinner. The report also included financial analysis. Sarah had pulled Kyle's business records, public information since he had an LLC registered in Arizona. His luxury car rental business was struggling. Revenue had dropped 40% in the past 2 years. He had significant business debts, multiple liens against his properties, and a pending lawsuit from a former partner. Kyle Preston wasn't rich. He was broke and desperately trying to appear successful, and he thought he was about to marry a wealthy woman. I sat in my office reading Sarah's report, and something clicked into place. Adriana hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been selling Kyle a fantasy, telling him about my real estate portfolio, my net worth, my assets, making herself look like a prize worth pursuing. Kyle thought he was stealing a rich man's wife, thought he was getting access to millions. He had no idea what Adriana was hiding, because I've been doing some digging of my own. Our joint credit card statement arrived that week. I'd stopped paying attention to it months ago. It was for household expenses, usually $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Groceries, gas, utilities, that kind of thing. This month's bill was $14,780. I opened the detailed statement. There were charges I didn't recognize. Neiman Marcus, $2,400. Nordstrom, $1,850. A jewelry store in Scottsdale, $3,200. Restaurants I'd never been to. Spa services I'd never authorized. I went back through previous statements. Found the same pattern going back 2 years. Adriana had been running up massive credit card bills, $10,000 to $15,000 per month, on our joint account. I've been paying them automatically without looking at the details. Over 2 years, she'd spent over $340,000. But it got worse. I pulled her personal credit report, something I could do since we were married and had joint financial accounts. She had 4 credit cards I didn't know about, all maxed out. Capital One, $18,000 balance. Chase, $22,000 balance. American Express, $35,000 balance. Discover, $12,000 balance. Total, $87,000 in secret credit card debt, plus the $340,000 she'd spent on our joint cards. Adriana was over $400,000 in debt, and she'd been hiding it from me for years. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was a financial disaster. A shopping addict with a spending problem she'd been covering up by using my money. And Kyle Preston had no idea. He thought he was getting a wealthy woman. Instead, he was about to inherit $250,000 in credit card debt. The plan formed quickly after that. I called Richard. I have everything I need, I told him. The affair, the photos, the financial evidence. I'm ready to file. What do you want the outcome to be? I want to protect my assets. I want her to take her debt with her. And I want Kyle Preston to find out exactly what he's getting. Richard was quiet for a moment. That's going to require some creative lawyering. That's why I hired you. Okay, here's what we do. Arizona is a community property state, so normally debts incurred during the marriage are split 50-50, just like assets. But if we can prove she incurred those debts fraudulently or for non-marital purposes, we can argue she should bear full responsibility. The affair qualifies as non-marital purpose. The gifts she bought for her boyfriend definitely do. The hotels they stayed at. The expensive dinners. If we can trace those credit card charges directly to her affair, we can argue they're her separate debt. What about the joint credit cards she ran up? Same thing. If the charges were for her personal benefit and not household expenses, we can seek reimbursement. Can we actually make her pay me back? We could try. At minimum, we can use it as leverage to get her to accept a settlement that protects her assets. Do it. Richard filed for divorce 3 days later. Adriana was served at home while I was at work. She called me immediately, hysterical. Vincent, what the hell is this? Divorce papers? What's going on? I know about Kyle. Silence. I know about the affair. I know about the hotels. I know about everything, Adriana. That's not. I have photos. I have credit card statements. I have 2 years of evidence. Don't bother lying. Her voice changed. Became harder. Fine. You know. So what? We're getting divorced anyway. I'll get half of everything, and you can go be alone in your big empty house. Actually, you won't. Arizona is a community property state. Vincent, I'm entitled to half. You're entitled to half the community property. My real estate holdings aren't community property. They're held in a separate LLC that predates our marriage. You used marital funds to maintain those properties. Prove it. My accountant keeps immaculate records. Every dollar that went into those properties came from the LLC's operating income, not from marital funds. She was breathing hard on the other end. What about the house? The house is community property. We'll split the equity. Should be about $250,000 for each of us. That's it. After 11 years of marriage, I get $250,000. Actually, you get less than that. What are you talking about? You owe $427,000 in credit card debt, Adriana. You spent $340,000 on our joint cards over 2 years. Most of it on gifts for Kyle, hotels, dinners, shopping. Plus you have $87,000 in secret credit cards you never told me about. The silence on her end was deafening. Under Arizona law, debts incurred during marriage are community debts. Normally, we'd split them 50-50. But since you incurred them fraudulently for the purpose of conducting an extramarital affair, my attorney is arguing you should bear full responsibility. You can't do that. I can try. And even if the judge makes me pay half, that's $213,000 off my share of the house equity. Which means you walk away with about $37,000 and $427,000 in debt. Kyle's gonna love that. You bastard. I worked for 15 years to build what I have. You spent 2 years throwing away money on an affair. Those are the consequences. She hung up on me. Her attorney, a guy named Paul something, called Richard the next day. They had a conference call that Richard put on speaker, so I could listen. My client is willing to settle this amicably, Paul said. She'll agree to a clean split. Half the house equity, half the savings, no spousal support claims. And the credit card debt? Richard asked. That's community debt. It should be split equally. The debt was incurred for non-marital purposes. Specifically, to fund an extramarital affair. We have documented evidence of charges that directly correlate to hotel stays, dinners, and gifts for her boyfriend. That's speculation. It's documentation. I have credit card statements showing charges at the Phoenician Resort on the same dates my investigator photographed Mrs. Vincent and Mr. Preston checking in together. I have receipts from jewelry stores on the same dates. She gave Mr. Preston expensive watches. This isn't speculation, counselor. This is evidence. Paul was quiet for a moment. What's your client proposing? Mrs. Vincent assumes full responsibility for all credit card debt. Mr. Vincent keeps his separate business assets. They split the house equity 50-50. Clean break. No spousal support on either side. She'll never agree to that. She'd be taking on over $400,000 in debt. Then we'll see her in court. And when the judge sees the evidence of how she spent that money, he's going to have some opinions about who should pay for it. Paul hung up to consult with Adriana. He called back 2 hours later. My client wants to know what happens if she files for bankruptcy. Richard smiled. Then she files for bankruptcy. But she still doesn't get half of Mr. Vincent's business assets. And she still took on debt she can't pay. The bankruptcy will destroy her credit for 7 years. Good luck getting Kyle Preston to stick around for that. This is punitive. This is consequences. Your client spent over $400,000 on an affair. My client wants her to be responsible for her own choices. Another pause. I need to discuss this with Adriana. You do that. The negotiations dragged on for 3 weeks. Paul kept trying to get me to assume half the debt. Richard kept refusing. Finally, Paul came back with a counteroffer. My client will assume 75% of the credit card debt if your client assumes 25%. In exchange, she wants 60% of the house equity instead of 50%. Richard looked at me. I did the math. 75% of $427,000 was $320,000. I'd pay about $107,000. But 60% of the $500,000 house equity was $300,000. I'd only get $200,000. Counteroffer, I said to Richard. I'll pay 25% of the debt, $107,000. If she takes only 40% of the house equity, $200,000. That leaves us even. Richard relayed the offer. Paul called back an hour later. Deal. We signed a settlement agreement the following week. Adriana would get $200,000 from the house sale, assume $320,000 in credit card debt, and walk away with whatever personal property she wanted from the house. I keep my business assets, pay off $107,000 in credit card debt, take $300,000 from the house sale, and never have to see her again. The house sold in 30 days. Nice property in Paradise Valley, well-maintained, priced right. We closed in early June. I wrote Adriana a check for $200,000 and wished her luck. She didn't say anything, just took the check and left. The real fun started about 3 months later. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Adriana had moved in with Kyle. Apparently, she'd told him the divorce settlement had been unfair, but that she'd still walked away with $200,000 plus some assets. Kyle thought he'd hit the jackpot. A beautiful woman with a 6-figure payout from her rich ex-husband. They lasted about 6 weeks before the cracks started showing. First, the credit card bills started arriving. $320,000 in debt doesn't just disappear. Minimum payments alone were probably $7,000 to $8,000 per month. Adriana's $200,000 started evaporating fast, paying down debt, covering her lifestyle, trying to maintain the image Kyle had fallen for. Then Kyle's business continued its downward spiral. Without the influx of cash he'd been expecting from Adriana's wealthy ex-husband, he couldn't cover his own debts. His luxury car rental company filed for bankruptcy in August. One of my former business associates, someone who knew both Kyle and me, told me what happened next. Kyle had confronted Adriana about money, asked why she wasn't contributing more to their household expenses, asked where all her settlement money had gone. That's when Adriana had to come clean about the credit card debt. $320,000 that she was responsible for. That was eating up every dollar she had. Kyle lost his mind. He thought he was getting a wealthy woman. Instead, he'd gotten someone with more debt than he had. Someone whose divorce settlement was already gone because she'd spent years living beyond her means. The relationship imploded. Kyle kicked Adriana out, told her he wasn't going to support someone else's shopping addiction, that she'd lied to him about her financial situation. The irony wasn't lost on me. Adriana had lied to Kyle about being wealthy. Kyle had lied to Adriana about being successful. They'd both been selling each other fantasies, and when reality hit, neither of them wanted what they'd actually gotten. Adriana moved into a small apartment in Tempe, started working at an event planning company, not running her own business anymore, just working as a coordinator for someone else. Last I heard, she was still paying off that credit card debt. Will be for years. Kyle's business never recovered. The bankruptcy went through, and he closed down the luxury car rental company, started working as a sales manager at a regular car dealership. Two people who thought they were trading up had both ended up worse off than when they started. As for me, I bought a new house, smaller than the Paradise Valley place, but newer, modern, in a quiet neighborhood in North Scottsdale. 3 bedrooms, mountain views, a pool. I didn't need 4 bedrooms and 2 acres anymore. I needed a fresh start. My business continued to grow. I acquired 2 more commercial properties that year, expanded into California, and increased my portfolio value by another $3 million. About a year after the divorce was final, I ran into Adriana at a restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale. I was there with a date, a woman named Lauren who owned a successful interior design firm. Smart, independent, paid her own bills. Adriana was there with some friends. She saw me and looked away quickly, but not before I caught the expression on her face. Regret, embarrassment, maybe a little bit of envy. She'd gambled on Kyle being her ticket to a better life. Thought she could trade in a husband who'd actually built something for a guy who looked successful but was drowning in debt. Instead, she'd lost everything. The house, the lifestyle, the security. And gained a mountain of debt she'd be paying off for the next decade. Kyle had thought he was stealing a rich man's wife. Thought he was getting access to millions in assets and a life of luxury. Instead, he got stuck with a woman who had $250,000 in credit card debt and expensive tastes she could no longer afford. They'd both learned an expensive lesson about the difference between appearance and reality. I learned something too. I'd learned to pay attention to the details, to verify trust instead of just giving it blindly, to protect what I'd built. And I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do to someone. It's letting them face the natural consequences of their own choices. Adriana chose to have an affair, chose to spend over $400,000 on maintaining that affair while hiding debt from her husband, chose to plan a future with a man who was just as broke as she was about to become. Kyle chose to pursue a married woman, chose to believe the fantasy she was selling him, chose to think he could coast on someone else's wealth instead of building his own. They both chose poorly, and they both got exactly what they deserved. I didn't have to destroy them. I just had to stop protecting Adriana from herself, stop paying her bills, and let reality catch up with both of them. The debt to the rest. Sometimes the best revenge is just stepping aside and watching people drown in the mess they made while you were keeping them afloat. Kyle thought he was stealing a rich man's wife. Instead, he got stuck with all her secret debts. And that was better than any revenge I could have planned.